So anyhow, my mother saw the bucket of water, so in her most respectful voice, my mother addressed the commandant, telling him that she knew where we were going, and that this little bucket of water wasn't going to make it. Surely you won't want the population along the way to witness the brutality of the civilized Germans. In 1933, Germany won 50% of all the Nobel Prizes. They were the most educated and cultured people in the entire Western world. The French used to think that they were, but the Germans were by far more cultured than any other nation. In 1933, the United States did not win one single Nobel Prize. And they created in every field, in music, Beethoven, Mozart, all the greatest musicians, in writing, and in technology. By the way, there was one Jew who won the Nobel Prize, a German Jew. Did anybody name him? Say it? Einstein. That's right. By the way, Albert Einstein was awarded the second one, and he refused to take it. He said, one is enough, give it to somebody else. He wanted to share. And he wasn't the only one. There were a couple other ones too. I can't remember their names. So the Gestapo took out his pistol The Gestapo sergeant unholstered his pistol and put it to my mother's head, ready to fire. A Jew was not permitted to address the Germans unless spoken to. This was a direct order by Hitler. The Jew opens his mouth, you kill him on the spot. And that's what he was going to do. But the commandant interfered, admonishing the sergeant, telling him that he was an idiot for not realizing that by killing my mother, they would be losing their interpreter too. Now you have to realize that Germany was a class society. The officers were a higher class. First of all, the sergeant probably came from some jail, but even if he was not a jailbird or anything like that, he still would be a lower class. The German officer, the commandant, didn't even look at him. He was standing with his hand behind. They were dressed to kill. Their boots were shining. I wrote a paper about it at Duquesne University, the shining boots. You could almost comb your hair in their boots. That's how nice they looked. As a kid, I actually admired them. At the time, I was only about 6.5 years old. Next, we saw the replacement of the water bucket with an oil drum filled with water. They headed us into the cars, 90, I thought it was 70, but then I found out it was closer to 100. There was standing room only. By the way, there's no way, if you had to go to the bathroom, you could make it to the bucket that was in the corner. You just let it go down your pants. With no food, we were on our way to Auschwitz. The trip would last several days. While crossing Czechoslovakia, the last country before Poland and Auschwitz, by the way, Auschwitz was situated in southwestern Poland. It was pretty close, pretty close, I would say a couple hundred miles from Czechoslovakia. And that's where we were going. Auschwitz, Treblinka. Treblinka was the town, and Auschwitz was kind of a suburb or so. So by changing the bucket into an oil drum of water, God knows how many men, women, children who were sick already were saved, probably by the hundreds. So anyhow, The Czech partisans blew up the railways, and that forced the Germans to reroute our train back to Austria. We were dumped in a large lumber mill. They worked the adults long hours while feeding us hunger portions. The owner of the mill was a rabid Nazi. He had a large swastika tattooed on his chest that whenever he saw us, he would open his shirt to show us, to taunt us with a big swastika. By then, Austria and Germany went through an Anschluss. They called it the Anschluss. That means they became one. And you have to remember that Hitler himself was an Austrian. He was born in Austria. In fact, I just read that the government there decided to burn down his house because his house became kind of a shrine for all the crazes in Europe. In order to supplement our diet, my mother, after a long day of work, would sneak out to a nearby farmer's village and barter for food. She would knit clothes for their babies and in return receive milk, eggs, cheese, and some bread and butter. This was a very dangerous enterprise, for had she been caught, she would have been shot. The farmers would have been shot too. You are not allowed to deal with the Jews in any way or shape, barter, do business, or talk to them. And those were direct orders by Hitler. And Hitler was obeyed. One night, a few weeks later, my mother didn't return as usual. We had no idea what might have happened to her, and we were worried sick. Panic started to take over, because without my mother, we were doomed. She was like an eagle spreading her wings, covering and protecting us. Although she was only 4 feet 10, she stood 10 feet tall. She was our heart and soul. She was a brilliant woman. She had 3 qualities. She was very pretty. She was smart out of the box. And she was gutsy. Because when she addressed that commandant about water, she knew that she was going to get shot. But in order to save God knows how many hundreds, she took the chance. So she was very gutsy. And she actually showed it early on. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. At the time, he had, before the Germans came, at one time when my mother was a teenager, he was, I believe, in the food business, wholesale, supplying to stores. And there was one store where the owner was very anti-Semitic, and my grandfather, when he used to go and collect the money for the merchandise, he would be raving and ranting and yelling and screaming at him. It came to a point where he couldn't take it anymore, so he sent my mother, 14 years old, to go collect. And my mother walked into the store, and with her hands behind, he recognized her, he started raving and ranting. She didn't pay any attention to her. And then she said to him, you know, look, your shelves are pretty well loaded. You don't need anything today. But some people are going to come today, buy some of the stuff. More people are going to come tomorrow and the day after. And pretty soon, your shelves are going to be empty. You think my father is going to give you one more nickel of goods? She came home with the money. That was my mother. She knew how to take it. Don't listen to what people have to say. Look at what people do. And I believe strongly, I'm alive today because of my mom. Some days went by, then one evening she returned, telling us that she had been caught and put in jail. She never explained how she managed to gain her release, and we never asked. Many years later, at the age of 82, we buried our beloved mother in Jerusalem. And along with her was buried the secret that saved our lives. We had an idea. Somebody squealed, and they sent a squad of Germans to the village with a lieutenant that was very, very handsome. And I think that had something to do with it. There is nothing my mother wouldn't do to save us, to save her family, to save her children. The family itself, we were six, but she also took care of her father and mother, her grandparents, and her brother, who was supposed to go to labor camp, but somehow my mother managed to convince the Nazis that she cannot take care of her parents because she has a sick husband and she has 4 children. See, she has a way of talking to you. She never, ever raised her voice. But the way she talked to you and she looked at you, she convinced you. I know it happened with us, with the kids. I remember my brother, Yaakov, being chased by my father around the dining room table. My mother traveled selling our merchandise, happened to be home at that time. She came out of the kitchen and she said, Tibor, or Tibi, she called him Tibi, come here. Not hard, very light. First, what did you do? That was my mother. She looked at you with her eyes, and she didn't look directly. In fact, she told me once, if you really want to confuse somebody who's fighting you or arguing with you, look about an inch away from his eye. You're going to drive him nuts, because he doesn't know if you're looking at him, if she's looking at you or not. So, as I said before, she was very, very smart. Not long after our mother's return, a transport train arrived and the Germans loaded us onto it. It was bound for Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in northern Germany near Hanover. Now that would be the equivalent of being in Canada or maybe even in Alaska. So it was very, very cold in winter and it was very hot in the summer. And I didn't mention before that I was on 3 death trains. The first one was to Auschwitz, the second one was to Bergen-Belsen. It was early summer when we arrived in Bergen-Belsen. By this time, it had become a full-fledged death camp. Although there was no gas chambers, there were no gas chambers at Auschwitz, as there were in Auschwitz and Treblinka, or Chelm, or Sobibor, or other places in Poland, but it was still a death camp. Just the method of killing was different. It was starvation method of reducing daily portions which killed you. The ensuing weakness made you vulnerable to diseases like dysentery and typhoid, and that hastened your death. You know, when you are starved for a long period of time, it weakens your immunity system. And if your immunity system is weak, you catch anything. So indeed, the 2 things that actually killed you because of a weak immunity system were typhoid and dysentery. If you ate, it went straight through you, which means that the camp became one big toilet. Nobody made it to the toilet in time, so you were actually walking in. Hygiene was so lacking that the barracks were inundated with lice and other parasites. The lice were biting day and night. My mother's solution to this problem was to have us eat the lice. She reasoned that we were just taking back what the lice has taken from us. It was a little tough in the beginning, but eventually, when you are hungry, you feel like eating your own toe. So the lice became kind of like ice cream for us after a while. We were picking, like monkeys always pick, you know, each other, looking for the lice. People were dropping dead regularly in all places. Many people just gave up, laid down, and died. Every morning at the gate to the camp, there would be piles of corpses